words. And I now give the floor to the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
شكرا.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, I would like to congratulate your country for this non-permanent membership in the Security Council, and I would like to congratulate you personally for presiding over the work of the Council during this month. I would also like to welcome the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Indonesia and congratulate the State of Palestine for presiding over the G77 and China. Mr. President, the Israeli occupation forces once again committed a series of aggressions using missiles targeting the Syrian Arab Republic territories from above Lebanese territories. It was mentioned by my colleague, the representative of Lebanon, in details. They've also used the occupied Palestinian territories as well as the Tabarya River in the occupied Syrian Golan. This came in a gross violation of international law, the UN Charter, and relevant Security Council resolutions, as well as the 1974 Separation of Forces Agreement. Such aggressions were not to be committed if the Security Council did not fail in compelling the implementation of relevant Security Council resolutions relevant to the Israeli-Arab conflict over decades, and also if there were no unlimited support from some permanent members of this Security Council to this rogue entity. This encouraged them to continue those frequent crimes and violations and state terrorism away from any accountability, even if it was just a formality. This was demonstrated by the repeated Israeli aggression against my country and the multifaceted support presented by Israel to terrorist organizations. These acts were not condemned. There were no calls to hold such acts by the Security Council in light of the position of the US, Britain, and France, who are partners and supporters of Israel in such aggression. The policies of those three countries and their position in the UN run counter to the responsibility they are supposed to shoulder in maintaining international peace and security in line of the international law and the UN Charter's provisions. Those countries continue to play the role of the false witness and prevent the Security Council from undertaking its responsibility. But this will not stop us from exercising our legitimate rights for self-defense and work on restoring the occupied Syrian Golan by all means possible. Mr. President, restoring the occupied Syrian Golan is a principled right to the Syrian Arab Republic. It's not subject to negotiation, waiver, or statutory limitation. The full withdrawal of the Israeli occupying forces to the 4th of June 1967 line is a commitment that should be applied. It's an unwavering request based on the principles of international law and the resolutions of international legitimacy, including your own resolutions 242, 338, and 497. The fevered Israeli attempt to change and alter this fact, as we have listened today to the Israeli representative. He talked about everything except the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This fevered Israeli attempt to alter the situation, including the aggressive statements and criminal acts undertaken, are doomed to failure. It will never lead to any prejudice against the legal or sovereign rights of my country. Some have invested in a terrorist war waged against my country. They counted on the situation of some countries in the region to overshadow Arab rights and stifle calls to implement resolutions of international legitimacy that call for the end of the Israeli occupation of Arab occupied land. Some have even tried to make gains from the occupation and promote some suspicious deal to liquidate the Palestinian question and the inalienable principled rights of the peoples and countries in the region. They try to ignite such artificial strives and surreal conflicts in the region to deviate their attention from what's really happening in the Middle East, the lack of stability and prosperity, that is, the continued Israeli occupation, Israeli settlement, and the Israeli massacre of the Palestinian question. Mr. President, the past period has witnessed so many dangerous and systematic Israeli practices that the occupying forces attempted to use to consolidate their control and impose their will on the Syrian Golan. For example, holding a meeting for the Israeli government in the occupied Syrian Golan in an attempt to organize illegitimate local elections there, as well as signing deals and issuing permits to loot the natural treasures of Golan. The last of which was looting the properties of the Syrian people and their displacement to establish a project for wind energy generation over around 6,000 dunam in some of the surrounding sites around the cities of Magdal Shams, Ain Qanya, Baqata, and Masada. They have continued settlement activities as well as crimes and daily clampdowns against Syrian citizens lingering under the yoke of occupation. They've also detained them in Israeli prisons arbitrarily, as what happened with the freedom fighter Sidq al-Maqt, known as the Syrian Mandela and Amal Abu Saleh. They've also subjected some to house arrest. Israeli officials have also issued repeated aggressive statements that stress and show that the occupying power flout with international law and the resolutions of this council and intend to continue this occupation. Unfortunately, all these issues and the objection of the people of Golan did not grab the attention of the special coordinator so that they can be included in his quarterly briefing. Instead, he failed to call things with their true name. He addressed us by talking about the Alpha and Bravo as if everybody knows what that means, instead of issuing a clear condemnation of the almost daily Israeli aggression against the territories of the Syrian Arab Republic, including the continued aggression against the Damascus International Airport, that civil airport. Such disregard is a political and moral failure to undertake his mandate in a way that runs counter to the principles and rules applicable in the UN, thus makes him illegitimate. Isn't it high time for this council to take the necessary measures to stop the repeated Israeli aggression against the territories of my country? Or should we attract the attention of the war makers in this council by exercising our legitimate rightful self-defense and respond to the Israeli aggression against the Damascus International Civil Airport by launching an aggression against Tel Aviv Airport? Mr. President, we are pragmatic. We recognize the differences in political stances among members of this council. However, we call upon you to focus on the common ground that join us. That is the international law, the UN Charter, and the resolutions of this Council. Thus, we stress the need for the countries supporting Israel and its policies and stances to review such policies and refer to that common ground that I have touched upon now. We have to work on restoring the legitimate rights to their true owners in line with resolutions of international legitimacy and international terms of reference, or else the destiny of this international organization will be just a repeat of the failure of the League of Nations for the same reasons. Let us remember that a lot of crises suffered by our countries came due to the violation of international law and the UN Charter. They're building illegitimate coalitions like the ones targeting Iraq, Libya, Yemen, Syria, and others. And due to a call for meetings that surpass the Security Council, like this Warsaw meeting or the Middle East Strategic Coalition, known for intelligence experts as the NATO of the Middle East. These are all coalitions made up outside the premises of the Security Council. This begs the question, where do such coalitions gain their legitimacy? Are international relations governed by international law and the UN Charter, which our founding fathers have made ample effort to agree upon, or is it governed by the will and the destructive agendas of some countries? Are we not correct, Mr. President, to warn that the future of this organization might end up just like the League of Nations if we do not all stand against the policies of those countries in the absence of the UN's sponsoring of the Warsaw meeting proves that such approach will not help in drafting a common strategy on the Middle East, as was stated by the organizers themselves. They said that the Warsaw meeting tries to put a common strategy on the Middle East. My country stresses its principled position, supporting the right of the Palestinian people for self-determination and statehood over all its territories, with East Jerusalem as its capital, and the right for refugees to return in line with Resolution 194 of 1948. We renew the stress that any measures that will prejudice those rights are null and rejected, because they will only escalate tension and will threaten peace and security in the region and the world. To conclude, I would like to address those who are trying to redraw the maps of the region along their own will, that our people who have stood against this unprecedented international terrorist war imposed upon us will also stand against such plans and will make it a failure, just as we have defeated others over decades. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative.